blind young boy was asked to sing. At school as a joke. But his voice left the room speechless. The auditorium was silent, but the silence was heavy with expectation. On the stage stood Ethan Miller, a 12-year-old boy whose eyes had never seen the world, yet who now faced hundreds of them staring back. His white cane tapped once against the wooden floor, a sound that echoed louder than any cheer or applause. From the third row, Ryan Parker leaned to his friends, muttering a cruel joke that drew muffled laughter. Sophia Reed, flawless smile, fixed in place, folded her arms, waiting for the moment Ethan would stumble. Behind them, Principal Anderson sat with quiet confidence, convinced the evening would play out exactly as planned. Ethan's fingers brushed the microphone stand. A small breath escaped his lips, calm but deliberate, as though he carried something heavier than a song. He wasn't here simply to perform. He was here to change the balance of power in that room. The crowd shifted uneasily. Parents leaned forward, sensing tension they couldn't quite name. Students whispered, ready to record his failure on their phones. None of them knew Ethan had come armed with more than courage. Hidden in his pocket was the device that held 3 days' worth of secrets powerful enough to shatter reputations, end careers, and rewrite the story of the school forever. And with one simple movement, the boy everyone underestimated was about to prove just how dangerous it is to laugh at the wrong person. Ethan Miller's world was built from sound. While other children raced bicycles and chased balls across the schoolyard, Ethan counted footsteps, memorized voices, and mapped spaces through echoes. At home, his grandmother, Clara Miller, often said that blindness was not an absence, but a different way of seeing. She had raised him since the day he was born, after his parents disappeared from the picture, and she never allowed pity to become part of their lives. Clara's tiny kitchen always smelled of cinnamon tea and fresh bread, but her greatest gift to Ethan was her wisdom. She sat with him at night, telling stories of leaders and musicians who had turned pain into power. "Your ears are sharper than most people's eyes," she reminded him. "You hear the truth long before others admit it." Ethan absorbed every word, storing her encouragement the way others stored treasures. School, however, was a battlefield. Ryan Parker, loud and restless, made Ethan his favorite target. During recess, he whispered insults, certain Ethan could not tell exactly where he stood. Sometimes Ryan would mimic Ethan's cane taps, drawing laughter from the crowd. Each joke was designed to remind Ethan that he did not belong. The teachers often looked away, too busy or too uncomfortable to confront the cruelty. Mr. Anderson, the principal, saw Ethan as a burden more than a student. Whenever complaints reached his office, he spoke in polite tones but dismissed them quickly. "Children will be children," he said with a wave of his hand, as if pain was just a minor inconvenience. For Ethan, those moments cut deeper than Ryan's jokes. When the person meant to protect him refused to see, the injustice felt permanent. Sophia Reed carried a different mask. To adults, she was the perfect student, organized, articulate, always volunteering to speak on behalf of the class. Parents admired her, teachers praised her, and the school board trusted her charm. Yet behind closed doors, Sophia was sharp, calculating, and hungry for control. She ruled the student council with whispers and secret alliances. To her, Ethan was not worth open cruelty. He was simply a piece of the scenery, too weak to matter. Ethan often felt trapped between these forces. He could not run like other children. He could not escape the whispers that followed him in every hallway. Yet inside him grew something others did not notice. While the rest of the school relied on sight, Ethan trained his hearing until it became a weapon. He could distinguish Ryan's laugh across a crowded cafeteria. He could detect the slight quiver in Sophia's voice when she lied during council speeches. He could even hear the weariness in Mr. Anderson's sighs when he pretended to care. One evening, as Ethan sat silently at the kitchen table, Clara placed a small box in front of him. Her voice carried both gentleness and certainty. "This is for you, Ethan." Inside lay a portable digital recorder, smooth and simple, with buttons he could identify by touch. "You listen better than anyone I know," she said. "Now you can keep what you hear." Ethan ran his fingers over the device. To most people it was a gadget, but to him it was freedom. Every cruel word, every careless confession, every scheme whispered in dark corners could now have a life beyond the moment. Clara leaned closer. "Sometimes the world refuses to hear until you make it impossible for them to ignore. This will help you do that." That night, Ethan lay awake, holding the recorder in his hands. The weight felt heavier than its size. It was not just plastic and circuits, it was possibility. A boy who was mocked for his blindness had been given a tool to capture the hidden truths of those who thought they were untouchable. He could not yet imagine how far it would take him, but something inside whispered that the balance of power was beginning to shift. At school the next day, when Ryan's laughter echoed through the hallway, Ethan touched the recorder in his pocket and smiled faintly. For the first time, he did not feel powerless. The announcement came on an ordinary Monday morning, disguised as good news. Posters appeared on every classroom door, bright with bold letters. Roosevelt Elementary Talent Show. All students welcome to participate. Teachers encouraged sign-ups, parents buzzed with excitement, and the hallways filled with talk of costumes and routines. To most students, it was a chance to shine. To Ryan Parker, it was a chance to humiliate Ethan Miller in front of the entire school. He wasted no time spreading the idea. "Let him perform," Ryan said loudly in the cafeteria. "Imagine the laughs when he trips on stage or sings off key." His friends roared with approval. Their cruel amusement rolled through the tables, and soon the suggestion became a rumor too loud for Ethan not to hear. Sophia Reed, ever the strategist, caught wind of Ryan's plan and decided to sharpen it. Where Ryan wanted a laugh, she wanted a spectacle. "If Ethan joins, it will be the highlight of the show," she told her circle of friends, her smile perfectly polished. "No one will forget it. The poor boy wants attention. Let us give him more than he can handle." In front of adults, she framed it as encouragement, but in private she whispered directions. Spread the idea, corner Ethan with invitations, leave him no escape. By the end of the week, Ethan's name appeared on the sign-up sheet. Some believed he had volunteered. Others assumed pressure had forced his hand. Ryan slapped the list with his palm and grinned. "This is going to be legendary," he boasted. Sophia's eyes glittered with quiet satisfaction. Ethan heard every word. What no one realized was that his calm acceptance was not surrender. It was strategy. Behind his still face, he was already sketching a plan only he could carry. The cruel joke they thought they were staging would become their undoing. The recorder Clara had given him now rested in his pocket every day. At first, Ethan carried it for comfort, but the talent show changed everything. He began clicking it on during hallways encounters, cafeteria chatter, and whispered conversations. The first recording captured Ryan mocking another student for a stutter. Ethan replayed it at night, not with joy, but with clarity. Proof had power. Days later, Sophia's voice filled the device. "Do not worry, I already switched the ballots for student council. The teachers never check." She laughed lightly, a laugh that sounded charming in public but revealed her ruthlessness in private. Ethan labeled the file carefully. The final piece came unexpectedly. Passing by the open door of Mr. Anderson's office, Ethan heard a teacher complaining about budget cuts. The principal's reply was low, confident, and incriminating. "The district sends funds for inclusion programs, but they do better in my renovation budget. A new office keeps donors happy." Ethan's finger pressed record without hesitation. The evidence slid into his pocket as quietly as a secret waiting for daylight. Every night, Ethan organized the files, memorizing each voice and timestamp. His fingers traced the buttons of the recorder as if rehearsing for a performance. He no longer felt like prey, waiting for a predator. He felt like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The date of the talent show circled closer, and with it the whispers grew louder. Ryan bragged about the blind comedy act that would headline the night. Sophia rehearsed her speech about inclusivity, knowing it would mask her schemes. Mr. Anderson polished his shoes, ready to sit front and center, certain the evening would prove the school's unity. Ethan rehearsed as well, though no one knew. He practiced silence, timing, and patience. He was not planning a song, at least not at first. He was planning a revelation. His plan was simple in design, but devastating in consequence, to let the entire school hear themselves, unfiltered, uncensored, undeniable. The talent show was no longer their stage. It was his. Night brought silence to most homes, but in Clara, Miller's small living room, the air carried Ethan's quiet questions. He sat on the couch, recorder in hand, listening again to the cruel voices he had captured. Ryan Parker's laughter, Sophia Reed's sharp whispers, Principal Anderson's cold admission about stolen funds. The words burned each time he replayed them. Yet alongside the fire grew fear. What if no one believes me? Ethan's voice trembled, the question heavier than the device in his palm. What if they all turn against me instead? What if it makes everything worse? Clara leaned forward, resting her wrinkled hand gently on his. Her eyes, though tired, held strength that years could not dim. The truth is like music, she said softly. It may start quiet, but it always finds its way to be heard. You cannot control how people react, Ethan. You can only decide whether to stay silent or to sing. Her words lingered in his mind long after she had gone to bed. He sat awake, listening not just to recordings but to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Steady and determined, he knew she was right. Silence had protected others for too long. It was time to make the hidden voices impossible to ignore. The next day at school, Ethan moved with careful purpose. He did not announce his plan or draw attention to himself. Instead, he listened. Every insult, every careless remark, every whisper of corruption became fuel. In the cafeteria, Ryan sneered at another student who wore second-hand clothes. "Look at him," Ryan muttered to his friends. "Charity case of the year?" Ethan pressed record beneath the table. Later in the library, Sophia whispered to a classmate about her forged recommendation letters. "The teachers trust me," she said with a laugh. "They will never suspect a thing." The recorder captured her words clearly, each syllable sharp like glass. Even the teachers left traces of carelessness. One afternoon, Ethan passed by two of them discussing the upcoming show. "That blind boy signed up," one chuckled. "The audience will eat it up. Pity always does." Ethan paused just long, enough for his recorder to store the proof. The collection grew day by day, a gallery of cruelty painted in voices. He stored each file with precision, labeling them in a system only he understood. At night he tested the sound, adjusting volume, practicing the moment when these voices would echo through the auditorium. Fear did not vanish. Sometimes it returned in waves. Walking down the hall, he would hear Ryan's mocking laugh and wonder if standing against him would bring even more torment. At lunch, Sophia's flawless smile reminded him how easily she fooled adults, and Mr. Anderson, with his polished shoes and practiced speeches, seemed untouchable. Still, Clara's words carried him forward. The truth is like music. Each time he doubted, he repeated the phrase until it became his anchor. The suspense around the talent show grew sharper as the date approached. Students whispered predictions. Would Ethan trip on stage? Would he freeze under the lights? Ryan promised his friends a spectacle. Sophia rehearsed her own performance, careful to keep her reputation polished. Teachers prepared to clap politely for Ethan, ready to treat his humiliation as bravery. What none of them knew was that Ethan had turned their words into weapons. The same voices that mocked him in shadows would soon echo in the open, undeniable and irreversible. Every rehearsal in his room became less about music and more about timing. He practiced pressing play, pausing and speaking with calm authority. He rehearsed not a performance, but a revelation. Each night he stood taller, his fear slowly melting into resolve. The stage was waiting. The audience was waiting. And hidden in Ethan's pocket was the storm they could not see coming. The school. Auditorium buzzed with restless chatter. Rows of parents filled the seats, programs fluttering like restless wings in their hands. Students clustered in groups, whispering predictions about who would shine and who would stumble. At the back, Ryan Parker leaned smugly against the wall, already planning the jokes he would shout when Ethan Miller stepped into the spotlight. Sophia Reed sat gracefully near the front row, her posture perfect, her expression composed, but inside she savored the thought of Ethan's public failure. The stage lights dimmed. A hush spread across the room as the MC called the next name. Ethan Miller. A small figure appeared at the edge of the curtain. Ethan walked slowly, forward, his white cane tapping lightly against the floor. The beam of light followed him, magnifying his every step. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, sympathy from some, mockery from others. A few students stifled laughter. Ryan leaned closer to his friends and whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "This is going to be the highlight of the night." Ethan reached the center of the stage and paused. The microphone stood in front of him, waiting. He did not rush. His hand slipped into his pocket, and instead of adjusting sheet music or preparing an instrument, he pulled out the small recorder Clara had given him. His thumb rested over the button. The crowd leaned forward, curious. What was he doing? Ethan's voice broke the silence, calm and steady. For a long time, people have said things they thought no one would hear. Tonight, I want you all to listen. With that, he pressed play. At first, the auditorium filled with static, the faint hum of background noise. Then, Ryan's unmistakable voice exploded from the speakers. "Look at him! Charity case of the year! Blind and useless!" Laughter followed on the recording, cruel and sharp. Gasps echoed through the hall. Students turned toward Ryan, whose face flushed red. He tried to laugh it off, but the whispers around him cut deeper than any joke he had ever made. Before the noise could settle, Sophia's voice came next, dripping with arrogance. "The teachers trust me. They will never suspect a thing. By the time I am done, the student council will belong to me." Her words were cold, calculating, undeniable. Parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and teachers exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia froze, her perfect smile collapsing under the weight of her own voice. The final blow struck hardest. Principal Anderson's voice filled the auditorium. Calm, but incriminating. "Do not worry about the missing funds. As long as the school board gets their share, no one will ask questions." Silence slammed across the room like a heavy curtain. Parents stared in disbelief. Teachers looked down, ashamed. Even the students, usually restless and distracted, sat frozen. The truth was no longer hidden. It echoed from every wall, undeniable and raw. Ethan stood quietly as the recording ended, the small device still in his hand. He did not gloat. He did not shout. He simply lifted his chin toward the microphone. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled. "That is what has been happening behind closed doors. You deserve to know." The weight of his words hung in the air. For a moment, the auditorium felt like it could collapse under the pressure of silence. Then, Ethan took a slow breath and said softly, "Now, I will share the song I came here to sing." He began to sing, his voice carrying gently at first, then rising with strength. The melody poured out of him like a prayer, like a cry for hope in a place clouded by cruelty. It was not polished like a trained singer, but it was pure, filled with emotion that pierced straight through the heart. Each note seemed to rise higher, filling every corner of the hall. Parents wiped tears from their eyes. Teachers who had ignored his struggles looked down in shame, overcome by guilt. Even Ryan, so full of bravado minutes earlier, lowered his gaze. Sophia sat rigid, unable to mask her trembling hands. By the time Ethan reached the final note, the auditorium was silent. No laughter, no whispers. Just the sound of a young boy who had refused to stay invisible, who had transformed mockery into courage. When the last tone faded, the stillness broke into thunderous applause. Some stood, clapping with all their strength. Others simply sat with tears running freely down their faces, unable to speak. Ethan, blind to the sight of their reactions, bowed his head slightly. He did not need to see their faces to know. His voice, his truth, had finally been heard. Chaos erupted the moment Ethan stepped off the stage. Parents surged toward the principal's row, demanding answers. Teachers whispered frantically, glancing toward Mr. Anderson, who sat pale and rigid, his authority dissolving before their eyes. No speech could save him now. The recording had spoken louder than any denial. By the next morning, his resignation letter was on the superintendent's desk. His career, once untouchable, ended in disgrace. Ryan Parker did not escape either. The evidence of his cruelty had spread through the auditorium like wildfire, leaving him cornered and humiliated. The laughter he once used as a weapon turned against him. His parents were summoned, his friends distanced themselves, and the school board-ordered counseling alongside suspension. For the first time, Ryan felt the weight of his own words. Sophia Reed's carefully crafted image crumbled even faster. Teachers who had praised her leadership now turned cold, unwilling to defend her. Students whispered about her schemes in the hallways, and parents who once saw her as a model student now avoided her name. The fall from grace was sharp and public, and Sophia discovered that charm could not shield her from the truth. The district launched a full investigation. Every hidden corner of the school was examined: funding, policies, leadership. What began as a single boy's act of courage became the spark for real reform. Meetings stretched late into the night, policies were rewritten, and oversight strengthened. The school, once ruled by fear and manipulation, slowly shifted toward accountability. And at the center of it all was Ethan Miller. The boy who had been mocked, dismissed, and underestimated now walked through the hallways with heads turning in respect. Students who once snickered behind his back now greeted him with genuine kindness. Teachers who had ignored his quiet struggles spoke to him with newfound admiration. Ethan had not only exposed lies, he had transformed the atmosphere of an entire school. Backstage, the applause still ringing faintly beyond the curtain, Clara Miller wrapped her arms around her grandson. Tears glistened in her eyes, though her voice was steady with pride. "You did not just sing tonight, Ethan," she whispered, holding him close. "You made the truth impossible to ignore." Ethan leaned into her embrace, his recorder still in his pocket, warm from the power it had carried. For the first time in his young life, he did not feel small or invisible. He felt exactly what Clara had always told him he could be, a voice strong enough to change the world. Years passed, and the night of the talent show became more than a memory. It became a story retold across the district, then across the state. Ethan Miller grew into a young man whose music carried the same honesty that had once silenced an auditorium. His blindness never defined him. His courage did. As his voice reached larger audiences, Ethan used his success not for fame alone, but for purpose. He established a foundation dedicated to helping children with disabilities, offering them instruments, technology, and the support he once wished for himself. Each note he sang, each program his foundation launched, carried the same promise that no child would feel powerless or unseen. Back in his hometown, the old school stood with a new name carved into its entrance: Clara Miller Academy. students. Walked through those doors every morning, reminded of the grandmother whose wisdom had guided Ethan, the woman who had believed in him when few others did. Clara's name became a symbol of resilience, compassion, and the unshakable bond between a child and the one who never stopped believing in him. And so the story closed where it began, not with mockery, but with music. One boy, armed with nothing but his ears and his courage, proved that truth and kindness could turn cruelty into change. His song did not end on the stage that night. It continues still, carried in every child who dares to be heard.